The meeting between Presidents Putin and Erdogan begins a new diplomatic chapter for Moscow and Ankara. So how do the two turn this partnership into a lasting friendship? For insight on this topic, we're joined by Joshua Walker. He's a Transatlantic Fellow at the public policy think tank, the German Marshall Fund. Russia and Turkey co-brokered a ceasefire back in December. They've co-sponsored a couple rounds of talks. It's a far cry from November of 2015 when a Russian warplane was shot down by Turkey. So this is really an odd couple in a sense. Talk to me about how we got from point A to point B and the significance of it.
Mike, you're right. The fact that you had a Russian airplane shot out of the sky was unprecedented. You had a Russian ambassador that was killed in Turkey. It seems like this would be a case in which both countries had very different views on Syria and everything else. But I think because of mutual interest and because they feel like they're being pushed out by other allies, whether it's in Europe or the United States, Russia and Turkey are finding areas of cooperation, and Mr. Putin and Mr. Erdogan have been able to kind of bury their differences to find common areas of interest that their two countries can work towards. And this kind of spells a brand new regional bargain as we're seeing right now.
And Joshua, Putin said this about Syria. He called the situation complicated and said there's considerable ambiguity and contradiction in the region, I think, which is an understatement. You now have U.S. Marines moving in. You have mutual mistrust, Russia backing Assad, Turkey backing the opposition forces, the U.S. backing the Kurds to the consternation of Turkey. I haven't even mentioned Iran or the long list of others. How do you sort all of this out?
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning of the Syrian conflict, it's been complicated. It's only gotten worse. Turkey's #1 objective is focusing on making sure the Russians and the Americans do not support the PYD, a Kurdish group that the Turks say are a terrorist organization and working against interests. Russia's been using the Kurds as kind of a leverage against Turkey. Now that they're trying to find ways of cooperating and they talk about military and intelligence cooperation, it'll be very interesting to see if these interests align, because right now in Syria, everybody's on different sides. The question is, does anybody have the kind of will to end this conflict?
Some analysts are saying, and I've been hearing this now for months, that Turkey kind of is really feeling frustrated, feels sidelined in determining the events in Syria, being big-footed by Moscow and Washington. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it is. I mean, Turkey shares the largest border with Syria. Before the Syria conflict, there was no closer countries than Turkey and Syria. In terms of what this means right across the border, they had to build a huge wall and a fence. I mean, you basically are separating two people under one roof here. And so Turkey's been very frustrated because they don't feel like they've gotten the support from either Washington or their NATO allies to kind of accomplish their goals. And therefore, you see them working more and more with Russia and Iran as they'll be having the peace talks in Astana next week.
Putin expressing careful optimism that the U.S. will help solve the Syria crisis. Does one more participant make it easier to solve it or harder?
You know, I think anytime you add another cook to the kitchen, it becomes more complicated. But I think here you have the dynamic of kind of domestic issues on the ground, where Assad seems to have the upper hand. That's who Russia's been supporting. Is there a face-saving way for Turkey and the West to kind of come to terms with some type of Balkanized solution? The question is, the Turks cannot accept a Syria that is kind of dismembered. So is there a way to kind of leave Assad in place, but to set something in motion for there to be a future change of power? That's what we're going to see kind of moving forward.
And Joshua, one final question. ISIL in Mosul and Raqqa, what do we make of this?
I mean, the challenge from the beginning has been who has been on the good or bad side. There are really no good guys left at this point in time. The so-called Islamic State, who the United States has targeted and said they're our #1 enemy, we're going to go after them. It's really hard to distinguish where they are. And when Turkish forces go in, who are they going against? Is it ISIL as their #1 enemy, or is it the Kurds? And so the question here is, how are the Iraqi and indigenous Syrian forces going to interact with these outside forces, including the Iranian forces that are on the ground, the new American Marines that will show up? What are the Turks doing right now with Operation Euphrates? So there's a lot of room for error in this whole complex.
Yeah, it certainly is. Joshua Walker joining us from Washington, D.C. Thanks so much.